For you. So,
We are
all
recording.
right. We are recording. We're good to go. I am Douglas V. Gibbs, Mr. Constitution, and this is For the Republic, Alan Myers' program. Alan Myers has an appointment also with family members on Mother's Day. In this case, I think it also includes his daughters. And I'm guessing Brady and James and Thumper and all the other wonderful people took care of spending time with the ladies in your life earlier in the day.
Indeed.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so it's good to see you guys. Now I have to say this real quick. Two things. Number one, you know your wife is a real trooper when her decision for Mother's Day is not something she wants, it's something that you want. And
Okay.
so she contacts me, well, gets home from work. She says, "Oh, hey Doug, by the way, thank you." And I said, "Thank you for what?" "Oh, for, setting up the reservation for Mother's Day." Like, "I did?" She says, "Oh yeah, you did it earlier today." Look at my phone, and she used my phone number. And I checked my text message. "Thank you for your reservation at the Green Dragon in Carlsbad." The Green Dragon is a tavern in Carlsbad that is a replica of the Green Dragon that the Patriots met at in Boston, Massachusetts, planning the Boston Tea Party, among other things. It's got a small little museum in there, which is interesting. Not as large as I would hope, but larger than most places you would go to. And the food was high priced, but good. It was definitely worth the visit. Yeah, so we went to the Green Dragon and we got a little history. So that's the second thing.
I
I'm gonna
have
add one more thing. And I don't
real
see.
quick. I've been
Yeah.
to the Green Dragon.
Mhm.
I was there in I think it was 2015 or 2016, San Diego Libertarian Party convention, back when I was rubbing elbows with the LP.
Okay,
And
so one of the back rooms then.
yeah, it was a pretty big room. I think we had close to 100 people.
Yeah, I walked back there and saw the different rooms, and they're good sized rooms, and they're all, got great things on the walls and all sort of stuff. But anyway, go ahead.
No, that was it. I've just been there. I like it.
Yeah, and my wife is the kind of person where let me say this without her hearing me through the door, ripping me out by the neck and then stomping on me. She has very specific tastes in everything. It is very difficult for her to say, that place was really good. That was a good meal, or that was a good drink. I mean, I spend more time apologizing because some place didn't. So, and her complaint was they don't have a blender. She says, "Wow, with meals this price, they don't have a blender." Well, what it is she likes to have a strawberry daiquiri every once in a while, but they don't have a blender, so they can't blend it. But they still make daiquiris. What the bartender does is he crushes the ice, and then he brings it in a martini glass, which she's used to, one of those tall. And so because it wasn't what she's used to, she was not happy, and she took a taste and didn't like it. So I wound up drinking it because I thought it was just fine. Um, and and on the meal, this was good, this wasn't, this was okay, that could have been better, and so, that's my life. I love my wife. I'm not picking on her. I'm just like, she's so the fact that she liked more than she disliked when it came to our meal kind of surprised me, because usually she's, yeah, like I said, a tough person to make happy. And then she says to me, and this is why I bring this up, is she says to me, "Well, Doug, we didn't come here for the food. We really came for the ambiance, the surroundings, and what it stands for." I'm like, "Oh, well, that's a weird thing for you to say. I mean, for you to say, but okay, that's cool." So it did wind up being an interesting thing. She was with me when we when I had that event in Camarillo, matter of fact, earlier in the week, and that also went really well.
She can't help but be a bit of a patriot, being with you for what, 30 years now.
It's funny too, because she wasn't in the beginning. She wasn't. She was very apolitical.
Yeah, well,
She didn't really
you might
care.
you might just be a little bit contagious.
Might be. Of course, her sisters accused me of turning her against them. They're all La Raza lefties, all six of them. But my wife's the oldest of seven girls. But I know my wife well enough that while I may have had an influence, I didn't convince her of anything. She made her decisions, and I will never say otherwise because I like to live. But
Well,
but
you know,
she comes to her own conclusions, or so she believes. But yeah, I'm sure I had a fantastic influence. One
yeah,
other thing, I haven't seen her in the chat room, is when we went to Camarillo, Best Nani, who's normally in the chat, and I don't know if she's there yet or if she's out with Mother's Day stuff. Best Nani and her husband came out to the event there in Camarillo, got a chance to meet them, and she bought a book, the white one, the Basic Constitution, which is my Constitution class handouts, in a book form with a glossary and an index and all that. And so if you see Best Nani in there, let me know, because I want to make sure I give her a proper hello. And because what happened was last week, she's like, wouldn't it be great just to meet Doug for lunch sometime? And I'm like, okay, where you at? She's like, oh, Ventura. And I'm like, I'm going to be in Camarillo on Tuesday. But because she got off work, we couldn't, at like 4:30, we couldn't get together during the day, and it was too late for registration for the event. So I contacted the organizers of the event, and they're like, you know what, we had a cancellation, let's get them there. And so that's what happened. And so Best Nani in the chat room got a chance to say hi, spend some time and talk, and saw me deliver a speech, which was, as always, unique. It's different. There's elements that are the same in my different speeches, as Brady has noticed, but it was definitely its own animal. So but anyway, so okay, enough of opening chat. Is there anything you wanted to comment about what I said, or had anything that you wanted to chat about real quick before?
I got a couple. It's funny. That's one of the big differences between today and 30 years ago when you met your wife is, I couldn't date someone who didn't share my political views. It wouldn't happen in a million years.
I was 17 when I met her, so political views was not my main reason for being attracted to her. Let's just say that at that age.
Yeah. Well, you just can't date outside of your political views anymore.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't happen.
It's like being religiously unevenly yoked.
Yeah. That's just how hyper partisan things have gotten. And it really started during the age of Obama. And I would always argue that was done very intentionally. That was always part of it.
Yeah, and you're still a single man, so you've had to go through those experiences as a single individual. And my wife and I are high school sweethearts, so I've not experienced the single life in the same manner that someone like you has. I mean,
you were going to
she and I had a moment in our marriage where we separated and then came back together. So, for that short glitch in time, I was kind of singlish, but I really don't know what it's like to be single like you. And so be honest with you, I don't envy you, brother, because all the good ones are either taken or busy with saving the country, and all the rest of them want to chop body parts off.
Well, first of all, you're going to get me in trouble calling me single. Lady Hamster is going to hear about that, and I'll get an earful. And so for the record, I'm 100% off the market. Just want to make that clear. And I don't think all the good ones are taken. They're having just as tough of a time finding good men.
Right. Well, if you're a single patriot, buddy, guys out there, you just haven't attended the right rally or whatever.
Well, that's really been it. I mean, you got like probably 65% of the people at rallies are pretty good looking, patriotic women, and a lot of them are single or, divorced or what have you. But you go to these events and look, I'm doing, I've Doug, you've met the last three gals I've dated, or you've seen pictures at the very least. I would say
one of two. I've seen pictures of all three. I've met two of the last three.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, well, there are good patriotic women out there.
You know what the nice thing is? If you've looked out there and been to rallies on both sides and seen the different people who represent, all the hot women are actually conservatives anyway. So
100%. 100%. Conservative women are the best. I was
All
going to
right.
tell you,
So,
I was going to give you a couple bartender anecdotes when you started talking about a strawberry daiquiri, and I think it's probably, I think I should do it. It'll be fun.
all
So
right. Yeah, please, please,
yeah,
please. I'm curious because, and let me say this to the audience real quick. I'm not much of a drinker. I have maybe a bourbon and Coke every once in a while, and a beer, even less often. It seems it used to be more often, and maybe a margarita with dinner. I mean, and until the last couple years, I probably have more fingers than beers I would have a year, and more fingers and toes than alcoholic drinks I would have a year. The only reason why I cannot say that anymore is because about once a week now I grab a drink with students from my used to be Carlsbad class in Oceanside class. So my alcohol habit is all their fault. Secondly, my wife has less drinks than I do. And 90% of the time, it's a strawberry daiquiri or some type of fruit flavored margarita. And she wants the bartender to be heavy on the fruit, lighter on whatever alcohol it is. So that's why the stories are kind of funny dealing with her. But anyway, so we have bartender anecdotes because you were in the service industry when it came to food and beverage and all that for a while.
oh yeah, from college, I've been done everything from being a host, a waiter, waitress, not really, bartender, bar manager. I did all that before I decided to, quote unquote, grow up and get a real job. And one of the biggest mistakes
Okay.
I ever made. Um, that being said, I was bartending at a Bennigan's in South Lake Tahoe, and it got real busy on the weekends. And most of the people that order strawberry daiquiris are pain in the ass, and they take about 2 or 3 minutes to make because you have to blend them and everything like that. So when you're working the well in a busy bar, the last thing you want are frozen drinks. And so amazingly, me and the other bartender on Friday nights happened to get a new blender that kept breaking down every Friday night right around happy hour, and it would get fixed again on Sunday mornings. So every time someone ordered a strawberry daiquiri, sorry, blender's broken. And so we didn't have to do that. But the funnier one is that there's a type of person that orders strawberry daiquiris, and it's not 100% of them. So I'm not saying anything negative about your wife,
Okay.
but we call them spodas. And in the restaurant business, and a spoda is someone who says, aren't I supposed to get more fries? Or isn't this daiquiri supposed to have more liquor? And we hear this all the time. You
No,
order,
that's my wife,
yeah,
except for it's supposed to have more
yeah,
strawberry.
it's supposed to have more booze. But well, the problem is you order a strawberry daiquiri because you don't want the taste of booze. But that being said, if I'm bartending and a waitress comes back and brings a daiquiri with a complaint to say it's not strong enough, what you do is you just take you just pour a little drop of alcohol into the straw and send it right back out. That's the first thing they taste, and they go, this is much better. So you fool them every single time without killing your liquor cost. And those are my daiquiris.
Interesting. That is interesting. Now she's like, usually when we order her a daiquiri, I'll set aside the waiter and I'll be like, extra strawberry, half the booze. And I'm willing to pay for the whole thing. Just So and see, I'm one of those people where I don't like blended drinks like that. So I don't care if they don't have a blender because, like for a margarita, I'm not getting it blended. I'm getting it on the rocks. That's why I prefer it.
Yeah, well, you can't. Yeah, you can't get a pina colada on the rocks. That doesn't exist. So you do have to have a blender, and I do like my pina colada when I'm in the islands. That's pretty good, Doug. We killed 15 minutes just so everyone knows. Doug and I have absolutely nothing planned. We have not spoken about we're going to do a show.
No, you have absolutely nothing. I got all kinds of things.
Well, I didn't come unarmed, but let's jump into whatever you have.
Well, the first thing is actually something I ran across yesterday. And so I kind of got a kick out of it. And I don't know if you've visited Political Pistachio since Friday night. This would have been posted on Political Pistachio actually last night at 9:47.
No, I was on there earlier yesterday because I was giving someone a link because I'd used one of your anecdotes on Patriots.win about the definition of regulate, and they thought it was so clever. I go, well, I can't take credit for it. That's from Douglas V. Gibbs. Here's his website. You ought to follow him. So
very good. So I'm in the process right now of writing a U.S. history book. This book goes all the way back to prior to discovery and exploration of the New World. So I begin with the Saxons and the Magna Carta and all of that. And then we work our way through history with the the discovery and the exploration and settlement, the American Revolution, all the things that I love, all the way up to modern history. And the reason why is because I'm teaching homeschool high schoolers U.S. history. And of course, I could not find a U.S. history book that was worth a dang, at least not one that's less than 100 years old. So I'm writing one, and the kids are getting the chapters electronically through their email. They read the chapters, and I have a quiz at the beginning of the class on what their reading was, and then we go over it in class. And then they've had a book report that they had to do, which I had a list of books that they were required to choose, and George Orwell was a popular choice among many of them. And so right now I am in the Great Depression. As a matter of fact, I'm writing in Teddy Roosevelt's presidency at the moment. Now, that said, when I was going through the Prohibition period, and I know enough about it because of the 18th and 21st Amendment, I didn't have to really look up very much stuff because most of it's coming out of my head. But nonetheless, I wanted to look up a few things because I had I wanted to get different perspectives on, what was going on and why and so on and so forth. And so I enter Prohibition 18th Amendment into my Google, and the history, I think is what I put, U.S. history, Prohibition, 18th Amendment. And I can't remember if it was the first or second or third, but it was one of the top choices, and it was from the History Channel. History with big H, you watch it every once in a while, hey, if anybody knows their history, it's these guys. Right? And so I pull it up, and the reason why I bring this up is because we talk about how people are so uninformed, we don't know history anymore. And a lot of it is not just because they're trying to feed us junk, and they may have been trying to feed us junk here. Some of it is because we don't even realize sometimes what's being fed to us. We don't even catch it. I guarantee you, when I'm getting ready to read you, 95 plus, maybe more, % of Americans would not have caught it. And they would have read it, and this little nugget would have got stuck in their head. Then that's would have been that. Now I'm going to read the first paragraph on the page from that U.S. history, from that History Channel page, history.com. And if you want to write down and if you go pull up the you can find the link. It's history. Just understand that between each of the words, once I get past topics / there's a hyphen, but I'm not going to read the hyphens. I'm just going to tell you what it says. History.com /topics / United States Constitution / 18th and 21st Amendments. And here's what the first paragraph says. And I'm willing to bet you Brady will be all over it. Holy cow, doggies. I kicked my dogs out. My wife opened the door because they wanted in. I kicked them out for a reason. Now they're making noises. But anyway, so here's the paragraph. Brady, you tell me. He's going to jump all over it. Twice there are errors in this first paragraph. You tell me what the errors are. By the late 1800s, prohibition movements had sprung up across the United States, driven by religious groups who considered alcohol, specifically drunkenness, a threat to the nation. And no, yes, nation's not right, but that's not what I'm talking about. That's a whole different discussion for another time. The movement reached its apex in 1919 when Congress ratified the 18th Amendment, prohibiting the manufacture, transportation, and sale of intoxicating liquors. Prohibition proved difficult to enforce and failed to have the intended effect of eliminating crime and other social problems. To the contrary, it led to a rise in organized crime as the bootlegging of alcohol became an ever more lucrative operation. In 1933, widespread public disillusionment led Congress to ratify the 21st Amendment, which repealed prohibition. Did you catch them?
Does Congress ratify amendments?
No, they don't. See, I knew you'd notice. Twice. For the 18th and the 19th, they say, well, Congress ratified these amendments.
They'd like to be able to do that.
They'd like to
do it, but they can't.
I wrote an article about it, and I basically say this actually pushes a narrative that the left wants you to believe. that if it isn't for the federal government, nothing would get done. They do everything. Couldn't possibly have been the states, individual states involved with ratification, because gosh, states are really nothing more than provinces or corporations, as Hamilton would have wanted to have called them.
Well,
Meaning
that's exactly why
entities.
anytime there's a grassroots movement or a bunch of states getting together to talk about an amendment that it's going to be popular, Congress will jump in ahead of time to avoid having a convention of states at all costs. It
Right.
has to initiate from Congress. They do not want people to actually think they have the power.
But here they've even got you convinced that the states don't even ratify. Now, for those of you wondering what Brady just said, in Article 5, Congress can propose amendments to the Constitution, or the states can through a convention. But in both cases, the states ratify those proposals with 3/4 approval. And when it comes to ratification, if it's not specifically indicated how they are to ratify it ahead of time, then they have a choice of either by convention or by state legislatures, which, by the way, usually, especially since most rural states have rural-minded legislatures, would be pretty close to the same, although I think the people would get what they want a little better if it's by convention. But nonetheless, this is important, and here's why. We have a narrative trying to convince you that localism not only doesn't work, but it shouldn't even have a voice. And the way this is worded, that's exactly what it's kind of pushing you towards, isn't it? Oh, well, Congress ratified it, you might think after reading this, because Congress saves everybody. Federal government saves if it wasn't for the federal government, that wouldn't have happened, Doug. Or one of my favorites is, well, don't you want a government that takes care of its people? My response when I heard that one was, no, I want a people who takes care of their people.
Yeah, when you're living in a country that's run by two national political parties, or basically one uniparty, the last thing they want is people to think that they can make change on a local level.
Sure.
And when you're top down, we're the biggest top down government ever. This is the most powerful central government in the history of mankind. The last thing they want is for us little, us deplorables to get together and actually try to make a change. But it's happening all over the country, and we are learning, and things are happening slowly, bit by bit. But we didn't lose the country overnight, so we're not going to get it back that quickly either.
Well, and I don't mean to bring this topic up next, but now it's going to be brought because of what I'm getting ready to bring up.
Well, before you go there, I want to touch on your FDR comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, it's interesting. I spent a little bit of time on Truth Social. I'm starting to spend more now that I'm getting some followers. But the lady hamster introduced me to someone on Truth named Colonel Towner-Watkins. That's TOWNER-Watkins, which is a really excellent follow. She does this. She's a former Air Force intel person and does a lot of the deep history stuff I love. She just did about a 20 Truth thread today, tracing the origins of the family history of FDR.
Oh, and it's a mess, man. His own wife is like his cousin, man. Talk about nepotism. But anyway, go ahead.
Oh, there's like 3 or 4 skull and I had to point out there were like 3 or 4 skull and bones connections there. It goes back 200 years to the origins of the Bank of New York with Hamilton. FDR. I mean, the Roosevelts and the it's a Delano part of the family that's even worse.
So what you're saying is it's no surprise they're Hamiltonian minded.
No, not at all. But it's I didn't know about some of these connections. I learned something today. And that woman, I've had a chance to chat with her a little bit through direct message, and I'm going to actually have her on for a show. That she's that sharp. So,
yeah. While I try not to get in this U.S. history book too deep into that stuff, because my attitude is with the average normal person out there. I want to give them the basic story first. Then, as they become more educated, then we get deeper. Because most people, if you get too deep too quick, you blow them out of the water. They're not interested because they've been, first of all, convinced that everything's a conspiracy theory. Now, there are an awful lot of conspiracies that are conspiracy theories. Guess what? There's also a lot of conspiracies that aren't theory. They're fact. And the tough part is wading through all of that gunk. Sometimes when you hear a particular story, it's kind of right and kind of not right. It's not an either or often. It's not either this happened or that happened. Sometimes it's something that you don't expect or something in between or a little bit of both. And so I want people to, when you research, keep that in mind and be a researcher that is willing to wade through the weeds in a manner that helps you recognize where the real nuggets of truth are. That said, yeah, the Roosevelt family, from what I've read, and now you got me jazzed to find out who this person is, because if they've got info that goes even deeper than what I've researched, I'm definitely interested. But I'll give you an example of a story where I kind of give the basics, but I don't get into the details because, and I probably should start getting into the details of some of my classes, but one of the reasons why I don't is because it creates another 2-hour long conversation also, and I've only got so much time in these classes. Is at the during the war between the states, one of the things I talk about is how the Europe was involved in the war. They were helping the South. Now, the history books and the narrative makers downplay that. It was good guys versus bad guys, the North against the South. The South were a bunch of evil racist bastards for rebelling and causing insurrection, blah, 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 and that's that. And if Europe had any influence in the war, it was minor at best. That's the narrative we are fed. And one of the things I talk about is that the Emancipation Proclamation freed nobody. It's a proclamation. It has no power of law, first of all. Executive orders, proclamation is an executive order. They weren't called executive orders yet. Basically have two functions: internal communication to the executive branch by the president for various reasons, often to discuss how to execute the laws of the Union, or external communications like proclamations to the rest of the country, at which time those proclamations are declarations by the president. They hold no power of law, because we know in Article 1, Section 1, that all power of law is given to Congress. Power to create law, modify law, extinguish law, repeal law belongs to Congress. And someone says, yeah, but the president has to sign it. Well, not necessarily. If the Congress has enough votes, they don't even need the president for that. So during the war, Europe was a problem. Europe was helping fund the South. They were building ships in Britain and giving them to the Confederates. They were bringing in, and when I say they, mostly France and Britain, were bringing in munitions and equipment, foodstuffs. Sometimes they were helping because it was in their best interest for the Confederate States to pull off the win. And then I tell people that the reason for the Emancipation Proclamation was one of the big reasons. I mean, there was a number of factors, a whole lot of reasons, but one of the major factors was to get Europe out of the war by making the war about slavery, because at that point it was about secession. It was about the unity of the United States. It was about punishing those rebellious insurrectionist states who dared to leave the Union illegally, even though there was nothing illegal about it. And by moving that war into a focus that was on slavery, the hordes of folks back in those countries, Britain and France in particular, whoa, our government's helping pro-slave states in a war about slavery. We protest, we're rallying, you better get out of there, you got some problems here at home. And that's pretty much what happened. And so Europe pulled out of the war, which got their naval fleets out of the war, and that better enabled the North to hit southern ports. Now, it's really actually not that simple, because if you know your history, one of the things you know is that the North had ships all around the South. They were blockading the South. Well, then how is it that these European ships were interfering or keeping the Americans from invading those ports, those Confederate ports, the federal Navy, from invading those ports. See, that's where it becomes a longer conversation. So I usually don't even get into that. Now I'm going to get into it with you because this is a tidbit that, now that I brought it up, you ought to know. So the British had what was called blockade runners. These were faster, more maneuverable ships. The Union Navy wasn't exactly a armada. It wasn't exactly a huge navy. In fact, the United States wasn't, while they did have a bigger navy than they did in previous years, it wasn't this massive navy that could possibly cover every single port along the South and completely cover the entire South. They had ships in key areas. The blockade runners simply went around them, especially at night. So, and because the blockade runners, these British ships, were basically from West Indies mostly, bringing in stuff and leaving and all this other stuff, the northern ships really couldn't even do much about these ports and about the Confederacy because they're too busy dealing with the blockade runners. So invasions, total control of the ports were not possible. There had been an invasion on New Orleans, for example. They had men on the ground, yet basically from the Mississippi, where it was up in the northern states, from that point south, Confederacy actually had full use of the Mississippi River. They weren't really worried because the North controlled the northern end and New Orleans. But if you got past New Orleans, they didn't have enough personnel, ships, whatever, to really control the Mississippi. And really having New Orleans wasn't about the port yet as much as it was the people in that area. And that wasn't going well. There was a General Butler who basically was, for lack of a better way of putting it, a dictator type minded guy, tyrant, who wasn't very popular in New Orleans among the people. He was called the Beast and the Spoons Butler because his men would take all the spoons from the civilians in the area for the silver, things like that. So you've got all this going on. So when the Emancipation Proclamation happened and the Europeans are demanding their countries pull out of the war, no more ships are being brought to the Confederates by the British, and the blockade runners go bye-bye. Now that the Union Navy doesn't have to worry about the blockade runners anymore, now they can hit Charleston. Now they can hit or control New Orleans better. Now they can start taking more control of the Mississippi River. And then after that, when the North won in Vicksburg, Mississippi, along the Mississippi, that gave them pretty much complete control of the Mississippi River. And then the Confederacy, when it came to waterways, at least that one was doomed, because by taking Vicksburg, Mississippi, and getting the control of the Mississippi River between Vicksburg and New Orleans, Arkansas and Louisiana and Texas was cut off from the rest of the Confederacy. So, and the reason why I tell you all that is, number one, it's a very interesting history lesson. Number two, when you hear me talk, and I try not to get too much detail, because if I was to spend all that time on that topic, the first time a student goes through that period in history with me, it'd be like, bored. The average person is, most people that want to hear what I've got to say, they're new at this. They know very little. So I want to give them, I hate to say it this way, but the Twitter version. The quick, short, this is what happened, this is what you need to know, this is the important part. Now, you keep hanging out with me, you'll start learning more details. So I want people to understand, when we talk about our history, there is a narrative that has been battling, though, what I just told you. Well, you're not supposed to know that Europe was such a problem. Or I'll even have a historian say, well, Doug, that's just not true. Well, if that was not true, then why is it that an arbitration with 5 arbitrators used after the war found Britain guilty for damage caused to the United States for their support of the Confederacy, and they were required to pay in damages $15,500,000 if what I just said had no truth to it? Well, if what I said had no truth to it, the British weren't really that involved in the war, then why would they be fined 15,500,000 for the damage they caused? So you have to also recognize there are pieces of the puzzle that support certain ideas. So just because you've heard something, don't forget the other pieces of the puzzle that might corroborate a different story.
I'm actually glad you went through that whole story again, because I missed that. Yeah, I saw you on the radio show yesterday. I heard the beginning of that, and then I got my phone rang and I had to miss like 10 minutes of the show. So I appreciated the recap. I was hoping you'd do that.
Oh, thank you. And thing is, see, and Brady, you're actually a very good example of something. See, a lot of the listeners right now, we have a mixed bag. And I love you guys in the chat room, and I love all you listeners. And we've got, close to 500 viewers right now. And this show has had more than that in the past. And it's a mixed bag. Some of you, you're just now like, all right, that's it. I've had enough. I'm tired of the guy who chases ice cream trucks. I need to get involved to stop what's going on. Some of you have been involved much longer. Some of you got involved at 9/11. Some of you got involved when Obama became president. Some of you, like me, have been involved in politics since Ford. I mean the president, not the car. And so some of you, that story may have been like, some of you are like, okay, that puts together some pieces I've kind of thought about. Well, Brady, when I first met him, while was already way ahead of probably everybody I knew when it came to history. When it came to that story, if I would have been launching that on my classes early on, I probably would have lost half the class or more, because it's a long story that isn't necessary. So I just tell the short version. Emancipation Proclamation made the war about slavery, and it got Europe out of the war. Then the North could start hitting the ports and really dividing the Confederacy. Boom, story's over. And then we go to the next topic, because the reality is we live in a instant gratification kind of society. First of all, we read headlines. So when I perform my classes or my speeches to people who are not real familiar with stuff, I really speak more in headlines. Then, as you get to know me, as you start getting deeper into this in your education, then I'll start throwing these nuggets at you that go a little deeper. Because what you start to realize is, as one of the little ads on my show goes, on my radio programs, because I kind of play with the matrix on there, let's find out how deep the rabbit hole really goes. It's a deeper rabbit hole than you realize. I just told you that the rabbit hole's there, and it's a messed up rabbit hole. Now that you've been around for a while, now let's go down that rabbit hole and find out how deep it really goes. And that's when I start laying the stuff on you. So getting back to now my history book. So the history book is, and my book, The Basic Constitution, about the Constitution, is real basic stuff. Then every once in a while, I'll come out with something that gets more specific on certain things. And so I'm looking forward to getting the history book out there. But I want you to understand, I do talk about Roosevelt. I do talk about different things, different characters. I spend a lot more time on Hamilton than I probably have in any of my other books, except for maybe the 9 Worst Constitutional Liars. But the real deep stuff, I have yet to write those. But I do want to make sure you get the basic story for sure. And now, that all said, anything else that you wanted to add, or something you want to talk about before we go into 2 other stories that are pressing?
Well, yeah, I got a couple of fun topics.
Okay.
Tonight. One of them is talking a little bit, since Alan keeps bringing climate hoax up week after week here, I've got some new information. It can wait till next week, or if we have to need some filler, it's about 20 minutes of stuff about really how the whole climate talking points are generated. I've got some really good stuff.
I'm mixed here. I'm dying to know. I think the audience would like to hear it now that you've teased us.
Well,
at the same time, we kind of want to know Alan's response too.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, Alan wants to hear this, so we'll see if we have time.
Is there a way to do maybe a basic synopsis to tease, so that people come back next week and they hear the more deeper version, and then Alan's response?
Maybe let's hold this one up
All
till
right,
the
let's,
end, because I got another topic that came up this week, and it's
it's
good
even more
for Doug and
pressing.
Brady. It's going to well, this is obviously not going to go on YouTube, so I'm going to use the right terminology. But we've been talking over and over again about how the 2020 election was stolen,
Sure.
and they always respond, "Well, that's never been proven in court." Like, well, it doesn't have to be proven in court; it's still proven as a matter of fact. You had Mark Zuckerberg spending $400 million changing voter registration. That's election interference. We had the bigger story is how the government conspired to help Joe Biden win by covering up, among other things, censoring, other opinions on social media. I mean, that's the Twitter files, but they also had the 51 intelligence agents, former intelligence operatives, said that the Hunter Biden laptop had all the what was the underpinnings of Russian disinformation. Well, it was a total lie. We knew that was election interference, but these are private individuals, so you can't really say that's a problem. However, the story that we got last week was that an active CIA officer helped gather the signatures for the letter discrediting Hunter Biden laptop story, and the House of Representatives is investigating that. So when you have a government agency interfering in what's supposed to be a free and fair election, how do you not call that a stolen election? And is that remotely constitutional? Because that one irritates me to no end.
And I'm assuming those questions were rhetorical, because exactly how do you? And when it comes to elections, though, and election fraud, and I can use the F word because once again we're not going to be on YouTube here. And when it comes to that, this is not the first time there's been accusations of election fraud. And we can go back to McKinley, we can go back to Harrison, we can go back to
Tammany Hall, talk about JFK. Look, the Republicans have cheated in elections going back decades. There is election.
As have Democrats. I mean, as has Federalist Party, as has, this is what political hacks, statists, and tyrants do. Or as I like to say, tyrants act tyrannical, liars lie, criminals act criminally, thieves steal. This is what they do.
Yep. And the only solution to that is because it is human nature, and is reduce the amount of power that being involved in government can have. And that's what the Constitution was all about. It was limited power. Don't have a central authority where it makes sense for people that are bad actors to say, hey, this is a place I can make billions and get a lot of power. You've got to basically defang them.
And Dynamix in the chat room says, well, we've been lied to literally about everything, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah, that is absolutely
But
true.
once again, this is what tyrants do. And the tyrants have wanted to stop the March of Liberty before the ink was dry on the Constitution. This is an age-old war that goes all the way back to ancient Egypt and before that even.
Yeah, we saw in chat earlier a few minutes ago, somebody typed that, and I hadn't heard this yet, so thank you for typing that. But apparently the left is now banning Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind has now been canceled. One of the all-time literary classics is about to disappear from bookshelves. And that's what they do. They rewrite history. And, look, what could possibly be more ironic than to know that they're actually rewriting the book 1984? Orwell's book about rewriting history is now being rewritten. I don't know what spells dystopian irony more than that. I think that's
exactly.
That's got to be a T-shirt.
Well, I am pushing for a new bumper sticker that I want to make, which says, "Normal is the new weird." But anyway, all right, interesting. Gone with the.
Well, let me read this. Let me read you a little bit about this.
Scarlett, I don't give a damn. Yeah.
So the story goes, and this is from Washington Times, who's been doing some pretty good reporting. A CIA official helped wrangle signatories to the October 2020 letter of 51 former federal intelligence officials discrediting information from Hunter Biden's abandoned laptop as Russian disinformation, according to a new congressional report. Former CIA analyst David Carians, a signatory of the letter, told congressional investigators that a CIA employee affiliated with the agency's Pre-Publication Classification Review Board, the PCRB, informed him of the letter and asked him if he would sign it, which he agreed to do. The revelation shows the effort to support President Biden's 2020 campaign by crushing the laptop story extended into the CIA, despite evidence that officials actively working in the Intelligence Committee should have known the laptop was authentic because the FBI had it and had confirmed it. So, Doug, here's where this one's so egregious to me. Those of you who've seen my channel know I do a lot of talk about how the shadow state, the CIA, the CFR are the ones who really set American foreign policy, and they have. It's a rogue government in many ways. We may think we elect, our political leaders, but they take their orders from somebody else. When you have an intelligence agency putting their fingers on the scale of what's supposed to be an election, you no longer have representative government. What you have is tyranny. And it's tyranny by intelligence agencies that are completely unsupervised and uncensorable by Congress because they control their own funding through illicit means, namely narcotics trafficking.
We can call it a standing army if we want, but go ahead.
No, there you go. That's exactly what's going on here. Are we not already living in a tyranny of unprecedented levels? I mean, that is right there should be the most alarming. I mean, I don't care how radical of a leftist you are. When you know when it's known and provable that the intelligence agencies are putting their finger on the scales of elections, we have a problem. But and you notice that not a single Democrat will call it out. So now you know that who's basically
they're benefiting from it. Why would they call it out?
Well, 100%. They would. They called out election fraud and problems with voting machines 6 years ago. Not anymore. Let's walk away from these political parties, people. Unfortunately, we have to keep trying to take over the Republican Party with honest people, because that's the only way we really are going to seize power back peacefully.
Well, the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans is the Republicans have a handful of people that are worth a damn.
I would say the difference is in the voters. The Republicans are forced, even if every single Republican Congress critter is corrupt, they understand they have to do some things their voters like, otherwise they'll never get back in. I mean, right. even Lindsey Graham will do something occasionally we approve of or say something we like, but the Democrat voters, they've got a completely different goals and narratives. They recognize the corruption of corporate America combining with the government. Their solution, though, is just more government, whereas our solution is less.
Sure,
we have the practical solution that's actually more constitutional. Unfortunately, this whole right versus left nonsense has been able to permeate for so long that the tribalism really keeps, you don't get to see the populist left and populist right to get together, although that's starting to happen. We're starting to bridge those gaps as people wake up. You see over the weekend, the number of protests in cities like Chicago and some of the black neighborhoods, they're furious about the open border. They recognize what's happening. It's actually impacting their jobs, their people. They're seeing resources that are going to, don't even get me started, illegal aliens. I'm not even going to play their word games. I saw an article this week where in a couple of places, homeless American veterans were kicked out of their hotels so that illegal aliens could take their spots. And if that's about the most un-American thing I think I've ever heard. So they're kicking veterans onto the streets to give those beds to somebody else. And the reason the hotels are doing it is because the NGOs sponsoring the illegal aliens pay more than the veterans associations do. So it's all about the hotels making money.
Well, and the moment a figure becomes a threat, they are eliminated. In the chat room, Robert Kennedy's assassination got brought up. Sirhan. Evidence shows that neither one of Sirhan's shots hit Robert Kennedy, for example. What's going on there? So we've, Dynamex said, Zach, we've been conquered. Not completely. I don't believe we are down and out just yet. This has happened before. And you were talking about these riots and going on in black neighborhoods and so on and so forth. This has happened before, where you had similar situations with lots of homeless shanty towns, so to speak, and so forth. You've got during the Great Depression, and then you've got during the Progressive era. What a surprise. Similar things going on in the 1910s, and early 1920s. And then 1930s, it revved up again because, someone got in their way. A very popular character who wasn't willing to play their game and couldn't be controlled. Harding and Coolidge. Well, that sounds familiar too, doesn't it? It interrupted their plans. But then they got Franklin Delano Roosevelt in there, and that way they could start planning again. And then World War II got in the way of that. Threw another stick in their spokes. So this is a cycle, guys. And it's just our turn to go through it. But it has been stopped before, and it can be stopped again. Although I have to admit, with the technology and the head start that they now have, thanks to the F word, fraud, and things like that, it seems like it's insurmountable, but it's not. Now that gets me to something I was going to mention way long ago that I said would bring up a topic I was going to hold till later, but I can't get away with it because people want to hear, yeah, but what can we do, Doug? What can we do? Well, what we've done. What have we done in the past? How is it that we have proven that this can be stopped? First of all, localism. When I say localism, I mean getting control of not only of your local system, and I know there's a lot of dirtbags at the local level too, but doing things locally that have an impact that the normies see and hear and notice. So if they feel like, wait a second, there's either hope or, man, it's worse than I thought, maybe I should get involved. A great example happened back in 2014 in Murrieta, California, my hometown, where illegal aliens were being shipped in by the busload. And if they could not be given, and they're being processed at the immigration facility here, because the overflow from Brownsville, Texas, and San Diego was such that they couldn't process all the aliens crossing the border at the time. Sound familiar? Title 42. Anyway, Rule 42. I mean, all right. So anyway, but getting back to my point here. So what did we do when we found out that 182 illegal aliens were being bussed in twice a week into Murrieta to be processed at a facility not made for that kind of processing? The facility in Murrieta is not a typical immigration station. It is a housing facility for criminal aliens on their way out, being processed out of the country. It is 24 jail cells. It's not designed to handle basic processing of illegal aliens in the country, coming into the country, whatever. So you got 24 jail cells, 182 people. Each jail cell is concrete floor with a steel toilet in the corner, people sleeping on the floor and having to use the toilet in front of all the other people. How is that humane? When this was going on, the city of Murrieta, a member of the city council at the time, a guy named Harry Ramos, then put an offer out. Well, can we at least get water, bottled water to these people so that they don't, so at least have some water because they weren't being properly fed or anything because the facility's not designed for it. The federal government denied Murrieta supplying bottled water for these illegal aliens being processed. Then the county of Riverside offered, well, can we at least bring in, because a lot of them are sick, word's getting out that every one of these buses are sick with something. And so we would like to at least have a vehicle come in with doctors and health equipment to at least, treat them, be a part of the processing so we know what the sicknesses are. Tuberculosis, from what we understand, was one of the common sicknesses, and two of the Border Patrol agents wound up with tuberculosis over this whole situation. And the federal government denied the medical vehicle supplied and paid for by Riverside County from coming in as well. And we, the people in Murrieta, are like, this won't do. And if the alien being processed didn't have an address or somewhere to go, they were dropped off on the side of the road in Murrieta. Homeless, don't know the language, sick. Yeah, that's exactly what I want in my neighborhood. So we got ticked. We began to protest. We began to rally. And right around the 4th of July in 2014, it came to a head. And finally, when another set of buses were coming in, they quit doing it in the middle of the night because we were there. They said, "Oh, screw it, we'll do it during the day," and they did during the day. And we, the people of Marietta and surrounding communities, and actually people now were coming from all over the place. We had people from Arizona there and LA County, you name it. And we stood in the way of the buses. We blocked the road with our bodies. Yeah, a bus is bigger than human beings. If they really wanted to, they could have just kind of inched forward and pushed their way through. But the buses stopped. And then they sat there for a number of minutes as personnel got on board and got off talking to the drivers. And as the driver, we could see the driver there talking on the radio. And then the bus went into reverse. And it backed up all the way up that road. And they got back on the freeway, went back to San Diego, and no more buses came to Marietta.
Yeah, thank you for dumping them back in my backyard. I appreciate that, Doug. It's very kind of you.
Oh yeah, you're very welcome. Well, that's what you get for living so close to the border. So we're like up here in Marietta, we're like 100 miles from the border. For those of you who are not in Southern California, San Diego is like right up against it. Yeah, just don't hang out in Otay Mesa, all right? But anyway, Chula Vista, National City, San Isidro,
Hey,
kind of
Doug,
gets rough. But anyway,
Doug, a bunch of people that come to your Thursday night class did a caravan down to the border yesterday. I didn't.
Oh, really?
I was busy, so couldn't do it. But a lot of our friends were there. And
okay, well, I definitely want to talk to them about it. But
Yeah,
anyway, get back to the story real quick. So my point is this. What did the federal government do when we, the people, united, stood in solidarity, and blocked the road? They backed down, they backed up, and they changed their direction. That is what we can do. Now, the reason why I bring this up is funny because a friend of mine, Vinny, what's Vince's last name for the radio? Yeah, he goes by a different name for radio, but anyway, so Vinny, Vince, a fellow host on KMET, I know him all the way back from my KCAA days when I first was on that station back in 2011. Vinny's show was on before mine. And he called me a couple days ago and he says, "Hey, man, do you see that happening again?" And I said, "No, I don't see this president processing them. I see it as a bum rush. I feel really bad for all the cities close to the border." Then the other night, my wife comes home and says, "Hey, from what I'm hearing, we're getting ready to go through 2014 all over again." So here's the question, patriots, what do? We do the same thing we always do. We get together, we stand firm locally. That's how you take care of this. They cannot commit fraud when you're standing in the road in front of them and refuse to move. They cannot push forward when you stand in the way, unified, in solidarity as patriots. They'll still do stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's like in Temecula, the school board now is a 3-2 conservative majority. I know you're not a fan of that word. That's the word I got to use because that's what everybody uses, and that identifies our allies. Conservative majority. And the first thing they did on day one when they took their seats in the school board in Temecula is they said, no more CRT, no more critical race theory will be taught in Temecula schools. It was a win, right? Well, sort of. You got to keep pushing. Why? What is Sacramento doing right now? They have a bill on the floor proposed by an Assemblyman Jackson from Moreno Valley that local school boards are not allowed to make decisions that are outside state curriculum requirements. In the state of Oregon, I have some property in a town up there, very conservative town. They've got signs on the streets that says that it is a local ordinance that goods or money cannot be exchanged between pedestrians and vehicles. Outlaws panhandling. They also have a law in that town that disallows camping in non-designated camping areas. Homelessness fought with the law. And then locals, if someone does pitch a tent, might show up with some rifles slung over their arm. and I know and their arms, and I've seen that actually happen in that town. I've got a neighbor who heads those posses, so to speak. So what is the state of Oregon doing? They right now on the floor is a rights to rest proposal, which would make all of Oregon, all lands in all places, okay for homeless to pitch a tent. Of course, the way it's written, that would also include, guess what? The school grounds. Could you imagine sending your kid to school and all over the schoolyard are a bunch of tents of homeless? So we do know that when we get a victory and we get control locally, the tyrants at the upper levels don't play fair and they will hit back with some really ridiculous stuff. And you know what my response is? Great.
Yeah, that
Because
exposes
now
them.
the rest of Oregon is seeing what they're doing. The rest of California is seeing what they're doing. And there's going to be more local activity, more local pushback. Local pushback is the way to do it. It all begins locally. How do you get control? Temecula motocross, yeah, Sons of Liberty, you got it. I used to be friends with one of the local, Jeremy McGrath. He was a neighbor of a friend of mine. But anyway, sorry for the sidetrack there. And so localism, getting control locally doesn't just mean getting your city council under control or getting your school board under control or getting your water board under control, whatever. It means acting locally, be it a rally, a protest, being a regular 3-minute information giver at your city council meetings, whatever it may be, because that's how it begins. Because, and Brady has said this a number of times, the government doesn't fix themselves from the top up, top down. Washington's not going to fix itself. You said that a number of times. I love that comment. You're exactly right. It's not going to begin up there. It's going to begin down here. This
Well,
is where the fight is. This is where the battleground is. It's in the trenches. The problem is most Americans not only are not willing to get into the trenches, they don't even realize that the trenches are there.
well, yeah, Doug, and that's, it's one of the things we've learned, the last few years. I've been involved for more than a decade in various political endeavors, but when the stuff really started getting bad 3 years ago, I didn't have a community of patriots all around me like I do today.
Mm-hmm.
And well, now I know how to find these people. You go to gun ranges, you go to Constitution classes. If there's not a Constitution class, you start one. You go to church political action groups. You find like-minded people. You go to rallies. You go to protests. You form your community. This is how it's done. When we move to Florida in a few months, I'll hit the ground on day one and start reaching out to all these people. I will immediately become active. Yeah, they're going to hate me for my California plate, so I think maybe my first stop should be the DMV. But beyond that, yeah, we know how to get involved locally, and you have to form your community and do that. And it's been incredibly rewarding because of all the amazing people that we've met. And I've got so many lifelong friends out of this stuff because you have shared values. And I don't regret the last 3 years for a moment, despite how hard it's been in some ways. But yeah,
How many times you heard me brag about that Carlsbad group?
Yeah. Well,
why do I love that group so much? Because they're active locally. They aren't messing around, man. They're out there doing what they need to do. And it's a class, but it's not a class. It's a fellowship.
That's what it is. So someone from that class, I think, is the one who actually sent me the anecdote I'm going to share with you. This is a friend of a friend's story, but apparently somebody who works in California's healthcare system is talking about how the system is on the verge of completely collapsing. Okay. California's debt is far worse than we're being told. This illegal alien push right now is going to push them over the top. A lot of these people that are coming into the country and getting they have a lot of healthcare needs. They're not very healthy people. It's described to me that 30-year-old men look like they're 50. They've got diabetes. They've been, decades of our multinational corporations.
Well, as Donald Trump said, they're sending us their worst.
Yeah, well, we're creating our multinational. Yeah, our multinational corporations have been sending our GMO foods down there to all the poor countries. We've been forcing them to eat our processed food, and they are not. These are not healthy people. America is not as healthy as it ought to be, obviously, with the obesity problem, but apparently this is even worse, and it's going to overwhelm the healthcare facilities, and which is what they want. so they can get, if the Obamacare fails, their next solution, of course, is going to be Medicare for all, and that will be, will be just like England, have 2-year wait times to get a broken arm fixed.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem's really going to show up in the medical community of the illegal aliens. So.
And that goes back to what I was saying, when it came to those busloads of people, they were all sick with something. Most of them TB. There was even a handful of them where there was cases of smallpox.
Yeah, we're seeing breakouts in border towns of several different diseases. A lot of them STDs, etc. They're not sending their best, and it's.
Well, I was talking about this on yesterday on KMET on that program also, how and let me give you some of these headlines. Let's see. Exclusive migrants cross Panama deadly Darien Gap speak of torture, kidnapping, and rape. Just to get here from South America. Over 60 families of illegals found living in a greenhouse. Now, I want to look at this issue, that last one, from a slightly different angle from what I just said. On the way here, torture, kidnapping, rape, cartels, other problems, and 60 families found living in a greenhouse, huddled together. They're homeless people that have been invited to come to this country, promised the world, and when they get here, they're homeless people who are sick, who's overwhelming the system. And now let's look at this from a humanitarian standpoint for a moment. Blood is on the hands of this administration for inviting these people here. The rape of these women on the way here, the molestation of the children, the conditions that they are that they're going through, 60 families in a greenhouse. And I take this now all the way back to 2014. We turn around the buses. One of the things that happened back then is I got a lot of media attention during that week, about week and a half. I was on Fox News 5 times, Fox and Friends twice, Hannity twice, and Greta once while I was out in the field. And I think videos of me showed up elsewhere too on various channels. I was interviewed by NPR. I was on One America News twice, and so on and so forth. Newsmax wasn't around just yet in the manner that they are today. And first time I was on Fox and Friends, this guy named Jesse Waters interviewed me. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know how much I would like him later. I just knew he was a young guy who did something with O'Reilly. I don't watch a lot of TV. And after being on the show, I mentioned during the interview that my wife was born in Mexico. She's an immigrant from Mexico. And she's even more conservative than I am on this. In fact, what I didn't say on the show was this. She was talking wall long before Trump was, except for her wall had broken glass on the top and gun turrets and a moat with alligators in it, but that's beside the point. When candidate Trump said, I would like to build a great, big, beautiful wall, my wife said, that's my guy. Now, so they asked me to have her on the following Monday. So she's on the show with me. I'm not going to go through the whole story. The whole story is kind of funny because she was not happy about it. That's beside the point. But here's when she was asked about what was going on. Get to the humanity part here. This is one of the best responses I've heard. And she was asked about what was going on, about how these illegal aliens are being brought in, and if a place could not be found to send them, they were being left on the side of the road, basically, in Marietta. And her response was this. Once again, let's take the humanitarian side of this issue as well, in addition to the political side. She says, in California, it's against the law to drop a dog off on the side of the road because it's considered inhumane. But the government's going to do that with thousands of people? Of course, now we can say tens of thousands of people.
Hundreds. Hey, real quick, Doug, there's something in the chat. We have an SLS USA veteran says, I've got a question. I live in San Diego. I'm finding it very difficult to meet and connect with like-minded here. Are there any suggestions? Buddy,
Well, the first thought is where in San Diego, but if you're anywhere near North County, have I got a couple of Constitution classes for you?
well, I put my email in the chat. It's war_hamster1776 at protonmail.com. Email me. I'll get in touch with you. I will connect you with anybody anywhere in San Diego. I think I know the entire Patriot community here.
In San Diego County, and I've got a pretty good footprint in North County.
Yeah. We will definitely help you out with that one. So please email me. I do check that email about once a day, so I'm slow on the responses to it, but that is my generic. No, my pleasure, buddy. I hope, buddy. Yeah, look forward to talking to you. Sorry, Doug, that was important.
No, that's awesome. It's funny because as mentioned earlier in the show, on Tuesday, I got a chance to meet a couple people in the chat because I was speaking in Camarillo up north of Los Angeles, for those of you who are not in California. And I mean, like 20 minutes away in Ventura is one of the regulars in this chat room, Best Nani. And she literally last week, she types, wouldn't it be great to just have lunch with Doug? And I'm like, okay, where you at? Let's see if we can figure it out. She's like, Ventura. I was like, well, I'm going to be there on Tuesday in Camarillo. And she came to the event, saw me speak. We got a chance to talk a little bit. Because it was an event, I didn't get a chance to really sit down with them, but we exchanged information. So next time I'm up in the area, we're going to make it a point to, spend some time talking and stuff. But there are Patriot communities all throughout this country. And for those of you in states that are not called California, don't be shocked. Not everybody in California are a bunch of commies. We are behind enemy lines, but the Patriot movement in California is actually absolutely incredible. We have an incredible movement here, and I'm a firm believer that Trump won California in both elections.
Yeah,
I'm a firm believer they've been.
How many signatures did we get to recall Gavin Newsom?
Yeah,
I mean, that's what it was, like 800,000. That's a lot of Patriots going out there and busting their butts on weekends and getting signatures.
Yeah. So SLS USA veteran, glad to meet you. Happy you're watching the program. And yeah, you're San Diego County. I live in Temecula Valley, so I'm right there nudged against North County. So I have a North County footprint. Brady has, because he lives in San Diego County, has more of a San Diego County spectrum that he's associated with. So glad to have you on board. And here's the thing. These classes, these rallies, people say, well, I've done rallying. Rallying does not do anything. Rallying does a lot. It puts you in touch with like-minded individuals. It gets the voice out there, but even more so, it's a fellowship with like-minded individual. And when you assemble, see, there's a reason freedom of assembly is in the First Amendment. It's not just for Green Dragon Tavern planning for the Boston Tea Party. It is because that is how we get to know each other. This is how, as Americans, we can come together and stand together in solidarity against tyranny. That's why this administration, and well, pretty much every administration, but especially this one, has such a problem with assembly. Why we are attacked the way we are. Freedom of assembly is huge. So if you're not plugged into a local patriot group, say, well, Doug, it's like a social hour, they get together, they have dinner as a speaker, that's all they do. Fine. Join the group and be the active person that gets them off their butts then. Get to know your local people and get them out there then. Get to know some city council members. I'm friends with a member of the city council there in Temecula she's awesome. She's up against a big time enemy with all the other seats. But she's awesome, and we do some great things. We're getting ready to see in May or June. We're going to have a street taco gathering. We're going to get together with microphone and stage and Constitution stuff and a street taco truck, because nothing attracts Californians more than street tacos. Really good ones, anyway. And that way we can get to know more people locally. We need to be plugged in.
Well,
I
Doug,
feel like I'm acting like a cheerleader right now, but I mean,
no, but
it's necessary.
we're so active down here. Next Saturday, I've got 3 events happening at the exact same time. One of them's with Audra Morgan, who I love to death. She's one of my dearest friends.
Is that the one at the waterfront?
That's at Waterfront. There's another
Okay.
one with the election integrity people where Dr. Douglas Frank's going to be at in San Marcos. I can't make that. And then your friend's event in Temecula, where she wanted me to do the change my mind and talk about the Constitution. I had to sadly turn her down. 3 events in a single day. I got to choose between the 3. And this is how active it is. But it's I'm going to miss this place, but I'm sure I'm walking into something where I'll find an equally good community. And if I don't, I'll create one or work to create one.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you don't find one, create one. And that same day on the 20th, I'm in Redlands that morning. Then I got my radio show, and then I've got an event that I'm hosting in the evening. So to man that change my mind table is not something I can do either. I have put together a flyer for them that I ordered, which basically shows the history of Christianity and anti-slavery attitudes in the United States. And the title of the flyer is America, A Story of Freedom for All, that I just created. I'll be putting that out. And then I'm going to be giving them a couple hundred pocket constitutions. I've got another gentleman who asked me for a couple hundred pocket constitutions. He's going to take down to the waterfront where you're going to be at, that I just gave away to that gentleman. And so if you see a guy out down there giving away pocket constitutions at the waterfront, that's probably my friend Charlie with my pocket constitutions. But yeah, absolutely. But we need to be involved, and we need to. But here's the thing: how can you be involved if you don't understand? How can you fix the car in the driveway if you don't know how the engine runs and what the owner's manual says about where things go and what they do? How do you fix it? Because if you start turning wrenches without knowing that, you do more damage than good, right? And that's part of the reason also I do what I do, because I want us to be aware of the way it's supposed to operate so we can then turn this around because we are informed. And when you're informed, solutions begin to surface, which brings me up to my next topic.
Hey,
I'm actually kind of excited.
Before you go there, I got another comment. I need a comment in the live chat.
Okay.
Earlier, Crafty Fox gave me a reminder, and I want to relay this to you because I'm trying to help you with your social media growth.
This is from the Vaughn chat.
Yeah, Crafty Fox with a helpful tip to put in all our links underneath our videos, and I keep forgetting to do that. So thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
I do that with my videos. If you go to like youtube.com/Douglas V. Gibbs, things like that, I do have mine. But thank you. As a matter of fact, I'll mention them right now for me anyway. politicalpistachio.com is my blog, politicalpistachio.com. The other one is douglasvgibbs.com. That's in the process of renovation. It right now is a mess. If you go there and you've never been there before, it's actually going to warn you, this is dangerous. It's not secure. It's okay to go there, but nonetheless, we are in the process of fixing up that site. That all said, all right. So,
well, hey, hang on, just to finish that topic, because I got to do a little promo here. And one of the things I'm doing with a new company that's going to help Doug become bigger. And sister Crafty Fox, good to know. Thank you, sis. Appreciate it. I always, it's funny online. You always assume someone's gender. Did you just assume gender?
You are welcome, Brady, and its sister.
Yeah. One of the things we're doing at Revolution Harbor, it's a new company you're going to start hearing a lot more about, and we're doing this for Doug as well. Is we're going to do it's some kind of tree where basically you just have to put one link in, and you go there, and your homepage is going to show all of your links. So when you're signing off on the air, it's saying, Doug, how do they find you? You can only give one link, and that'll show all the places to find you, whether it be Twitter, Gab, Getter, Truth Social, YouTube, what have you.
We're also going to teach Doug to be a little more social media savvy, but anyway.
Yeah, that's going to be the hard part. Unfortunately, I think part of that's going to fall to me. So my patience will be tested. Now, Doug's only a couple of years older than me, but for the love of God, when it comes to technology, he's like a dinosaur.
Yeah, well, yeah.
It's true.
Well, it's funny because when I got my first smartphone, and I when everybody was getting car phones, I still had a pager. When everybody was getting flip phones, I still had a car phone. When everybody was getting smartphones, I still had a flip phone. And I held out a long time. And then when I finally got my smartphone, one of the last people I know to get one, my grandson, who was 5 at the time, had to teach me how to use it. So yeah, I'm a content creator. I'm a quite a prolific writer sometimes when I want to be. But yeah, technology and I have not all. I mean, here's what's scary. In my family, I'm the technology guru, man. I'm ahead of everybody. So if you're worried about me, you imagine what my family's like. They come to me with questions.
Yeah, that does scare me. So it's 1999, and I've got my first real Wall Street job. I'm working for Payne Weber, which would be bought out by UBS, and I'm like this is in downtown La Jolla, where all 30-year veteran brokers or advisors were going to retire. So a bunch of 60-year-old gray hairs, and I'm about 28, 29 years old. I'm like the only young guy in the whole office, first trainee this office has ever produced, and this thing called the internet and computers are taking over the industry. And so apparently, because I'm young, I'm the one they come to for questions. So I had to learn all this stuff on the fly and be self-taught. Right. And I actually I sped up my learning curve because trying to when you teach other people something, you actually learn it better yourself. It's called the teach back technique.
Yeah, I learned that with my Constitution classes. As much as I was Mr. Constitution, I became more so once I started teaching these classes. But yeah, I know I was on Windows 3.1 while everybody else was getting other things. When I first got my first computer, I told my wife we needed a printer, and she said, "Why?" So anyway, all right. So let's bring up a constitutional topic because these are my favorites to talk about. And so the headline reads, and understand something when it comes to these people. They like to interpret constitutional things any way they want. And so the headline reads that Biden does not dismiss using 14th Amendment to blow through the debt ceiling. Now, I remember this popping up years ago when Nancy Pelosi brought this up long before the scamdemic. And there was a battle over the debt ceiling because the Republicans were saying, hey, wait a second, we need to do something here to quit what's happening. And she's like, well, you're required to raise the debt ceiling. The Constitution says so in the 14th Amendment. And at that time, I was like, what is she talking about? So in the 14th Amendment, matter of fact, let me grab my pocket Constitution here so I can read it word for word. In the 14th Amendment, in Section 4, 14th Amendment, Section 4, it says the validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. The debt shall not be questioned. Therefore, no matter what, we can borrow and we have to service it and we have to raise the debt ceiling. One of the examples I used, and this I stole it from somebody long ago, but I love using it to explain what they're doing with the debt ceiling and them just raising it every time they, and it's an illusion anyway, but that's beside the point. To help you kind of understand this, imagine the toilets are backing up in your house and the crap water has gotten up to the tops of the windows and they're reaching the ceiling and you say, oh my gosh, my house is full of crap water. What do I do? And your friend says, oh, I'm a construction tech. I'm a guy in construction. I'm a general contractor. We'll just build the walls up so that the ceiling is higher. That way your house is not so full of crap. Oh, great. Then every time it gets closer to the ceiling, you just keep raising it so that your house isn't full of crap. And at one point, you have to stop and say, well, shouldn't I just fix the toilets? But that's what's kind of going on, right? The image for my article about this last Friday actually has the Capitol building with crap water shooting out the top of it. but that's and the bubble says, well, why fix the plumbing when we could just raise the ceiling? That's, so I'm not the only person to have that antidote. Now, the reason why this is important is a few things.
You just inspired me for a new slogan, because I
Oh,
want to go back to a simpler life, and I'm going to say, let's make outhouses great again. So I'm going to do a campaign called MOGA. Not as good as MAGA, but close.
make outhouses great again.
No? All right. It's worth a try.
So the language here is interesting. The validity of the public debt of the United States, authorized by law. What does authorized by law mean, my friend? It's gone through the congressional process, right? So first of all, how much of the spending is actually authorized by law? How much of this debt was actually authorized by law? Oh, good portion of it, not all of it, first of all. Second of all, we have Biden say, well, I'm going to go around Congress to invoke the 14th Amendment. Well, does it not require Congress because it has to be authorized by law? So first of all, the president doesn't have this ability to go around Congress. Secondly, the purpose of this was to make sure that the debt accrued for the war during the war between the states was not questioned. That people who protested against the war, they were in opposition to the war, Southerners didn't argue about it. Now, that said, unfortunately, the word including makes it seem like it could mean other debt as well. And so it's a tough sell. So, but here's the thing. I want to take this a little further now. Rather than argue over whether or not they are misusing the 14th Amendment, how about you have the Brady Amendment? How about we create a new Gibbs Amendment that'll take care of this problem? You've heard me talk about this before, sort of. In the past, so because one of the things that Brady and I talk about is this thing called an Article 5 convention. There are amendments to the Constitution that Congress would never propose. So even if you're against an Article 5 convention, some might call it a convention of states, you have to admit that giving Congress letting them be the only ones allowed to propose amendments probably is not in our best interest. Now, that said, how about people say we get a balanced budget amendment, Doug? Well, no, because they can interpret balanced budget to mean anything they want. After all, Biden has argued that he brought down the national debt, and what he didn't. What happened was they spent less than they did a year before. So therefore, it's, we had this conversation the other day on KMET. I don't want to get into a big discussion on that just yet.
No, that's just the COVID mark. 2020 was COVID year, and we spent a whole bunch of money that was never part of a budget. And now they're trying to say, well, that was part. No, just knock it off.
Yeah, exactly. And there's all kinds. But here's the thing. So how about this? And I came up with this the other day. How about because I tell people, balanced budget is not the issue. Federal spending is the issue. Back in 2007, I was a part of a study. I did a lot of research during a study on federal spending. And what the study discovered was that 85% of federal spending is unconstitutional. So we don't need a balanced budget. We need to stop spending unconstitutionally. You stop spending unconstitutionally, you'll not only have a surplus, you could probably get rid of the income tax and fund the government. So, but the problem is these people keep increasing the national debt. The national debt has increased every year since 1958. During Calvin Coolidge's presidency, by the way, it actually went down each year he was president. That's beside the point. When Thomas Jefferson was president, the national debt went down each year he was president after jumping under Adams and his Hamiltonian ideas. So the problem needs to be attacked from where it comes from. The people increasing the spending. That's causing all this debt. So if you can read this, and I'm going to do another article later about this so that it highlights this idea. I actually came up with this idea while I was writing the article about Biden and hit the debt ceiling and the 14th Amendment and all that on Friday. And so if you scroll down to you go to politicalpistachio.com, you scroll down to Friday, May 12th, 2023. The name of the article is Biden Debt Ceiling, 14th Amendment, and a National Debt Depletion Amendment. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The ninth paragraph down, the third from the bottom, is my amendment, and here's what it reads. Any office holder in the United States, representatives, I should have put House of Representatives. I need to fix that now. And I noticed United States Senate, U.S. Treasury, or the office of the President of the United States who, during the time for which they were elected or appointed, voted in favor of or was party to carrying out any additional federal spending during the time they were appointed or elected that occurred during a presidential term that concluded during which time the national debt did not decrease, may not be a candidate for appointment, re-election, or election to any office under the authority of the United States, or hold any office under any state, county, or city, unless such disability has been removed by 3/4 vote by each House of the United States Congress. In other words, if you are party to increasing the debt at all, federal spending, during a 4-year period in which the national debt did not go down, in other words, 4 years later, the number is not lower than it was 4 years before, during a presidential term, you're done politically. Period. Unless, of course, you get 3/4 of each house to bring it back. And that's more so than what gets rid of that disability when it comes to the 14th Amendment for something else.
Well, it's funny about that is you probably would have eliminated inflation overnight. I mean, literally, the lawmakers are saying, "Wait a minute, we've got to have the
I want to keep my office.
The budget's got to go down. We can't have inflation. It makes it harder." You'll actually wipe out. You will end the Federal Reserve with that.
Thank you.
Interesting.
I'm glad you approve.
Well, I got to go through. I'll go through the details with you on that. It's the first time you've thrown that one at me. So
yeah, well, this first time I've thrown it at anybody other than putting it on my website last Friday.
Yeah, give me
I didn't even mention it yesterday on my radio show.
Give me some time to digest and play some devil's advocate for you. But I like there's something to it.
I carefully worded it, knowing that someone like you would try to do that.
Oh, I'm going to tear it a new, you know what? But that's the whole point. That's what we do for each other.
But now, real quick though, seriously though, our problem is not a balanced budget or a lack thereof. Our problem is federal spending, and the fact that federal spending. Now, I recognize that there is two kinds of federal spending. There is what's considered necessary, and there's what's discretionary. And then, when it comes to that, there's also that which automatically increases each year, and that which is added. For example, your department is going to get X amount of dollars. If you spend greater than 90% of it or all of it, if you spend all of it, you will get a, say, 8% increase of next year automatically. It's written into the law. And because it's a part of the law, it can't be stopped. The increase is going to happen, so on and so forth. There's a lot of that's going on.
All right, let me jump in. Let me jump in here because you're touching on one of my biggest pet peeves. The way the Congressional Budget Office is told to calculate the costs of any new spending is they calculate it out for 10 years, and that's it. So what all these bills do is they show limited rising costs for 10 years, and on 10 years plus 1 day, it's all the curbs are off and the spending goes spiraling upwards. It's one of the biggest issues we have, and the CBO, which sometimes does a reasonable job of calculations of what government spending is going to be. They're very competent and they're not totally biased, but they're totally handcuffed. So they give you this new bill of Obamacare is only going to cost this much for 10 years. Well, we're already past 10 years of Obamacare, and now we're seeing the spiral effect. So that's got to change no matter what, the way they calculate the cost of these bills. I've got a much simpler solution. I've always said Congress, it's very simple. Here's your budget. This is how much money we took in tax revenues last year. That's what you get to spend this year. You get to put a percentage amount to each of these programs, and that's it. And boom, you don't have a budget problem. You can only spend what you brought in last year. You don't get to spend in advance. You can only spend in reverse. This is how an intelligent household budgets. It's how intelligent business budgets. You don't spend more than you have. Sure, there's times when you need to borrow, what have you. There's certain big expenditures. That interest expense is part of your budget. Those are the fixed costs. So, but I think all of it's solved.
One of the arguments too with my amendment would be, well, Doug, what about wartime?
There shouldn't be war.
Well, if I make an exception to war, what will they then do? Try to make sure there's war all the time.
Of course,
in
they
order, not that they don't already do that, but to make sure they get around, the edge there.
Oh, if we're able to, hey, Doug, if we're able to spend more when there's an emergency, they're just going to create emergencies.
Right. Yeah, well, and the emergencies never end. Or as one man once said, never let a crisis go to waste.
Well, apparently,
it's funny because I mentioned crises rising throughout American history. Yeah, and guess what? Hamiltonians, they've always done the same thing. Never let a crisis go to waste. And then you create more crisis to make sure that crisis remains in place so you continue to add and consolidate power to the federal government.
Yeah, the COVID emergency, quote unquote, air quotes, big air quotes, ended on May 11th, 2 days ago, right? Today's the 13th? I think so.
14th today, Mother's Day.
Okay, so 3 days ago, it officially ended. And does that mean there's no longer a need for the emergency use author or EUA for the quote unquote jab? Yeah, they can't actually give that anymore, but they're still doing it. I got questions. If there's no emergency, you can't use the EUA. Am I wrong?
My big question is, if there's no emergency, then why today did I still see people wearing masks?
Because it's become a giant virtue signal. Always was.
Well, it's also for some people a security blanket too. How people have started calling people Karens, because of how about we start calling people Linuses for wearing a mask?
Security blanket.
Yeah. What do you think? Just start, oh, you're such a Linus.
No, that implies there's some security in the first place.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Brother. All right. So we've got, here's the thing that's interesting. When I do this show by myself, I can't wait until the halfway point so I can play a break, so I can take a breath and go get another Dr. Pepper or something. I'm on this show with Brady, and I look at my clock, and we are an hour and 40 minutes into the show, and I was still thinking we were approaching the hour mark. What is that? What am I saying? Time flies when you're around patriots who know what the hell they're talking about. And patriots in the chat room who appreciate that. So first of all, I want to thank you guys. We got about 20 minutes left of this program. We did not take a break at the top of the hour. It's funny too, because in the past I'd be like scrambling to, play something so that everybody could take a break. But this has gone so well, it flows so well. Brady and I do work together well. Question is, should we do something with that, Brady? Do you want to?
One of the things we're talking about doing is 1 or 2 shows a week on a regular scheduled live, just like this. One of those things with like super chats, what have you, but really doing like an hour-long shows hitting current events from a constitutional standpoint. And just really going through, like, in an hour show, we can hit like 5 or 6 stories and just do it the quick and dirty. And I think that sells. That's how we, like, when we hang out, like at happy hour, what have you, that's what we go through. And everyone's just mesmerized. And I think that's us at our best when we work together. But that stuff's all coming very soon.
Yeah. I'm a patient person, but man, I've been so excited about the next step in the evolution of Mr. Constitution that, be honest with you, bated breath, man. I'm in such anticipation. I can't wait until we get this launched.
Yeah,
There's actually a lot of things I'm holding off till we get there, because one of the things about me is my website, douglasvgibbs.com, looks like it's been created by a amateur with amateur tools way back in 2001. And that's because, for the most part, that's true. Me. And while I am a content creator, well, as we discussed earlier, technology and also budget has not really allowed for me to make the website something that is the place to be, the online destination for all things constitutional and patriot movement. So a little over a year ago, I started working with a friend of mine, and Brady has come on board, and we're trying to create something that'll do a number of things. But see, my point is, it's going to be a nice destination. I have actually held off radio interviews and things like that people want me to be a part of, because right now you go to take a look at Doug. Well, he did a great interview, but gosh, his site sucks. I want people to go, great interview, and man, what a nice destination. That's what I'm working towards. Yep. And folks, if you want to be a part of that, pay attention, stay in tune, visit that site as much as possible once it's on board. If you want to help out with the cause, you go to politicalpistachio.com, and on the right-hand sidebar, there's a donate button. Hit that. Because we're always looking at funding things. I'm also funding other things. I'm supposed to be in Washington, D.C. on July 4th, and I haven't raised a penny for the trip yet, for example. But, and like I said, once this is going on and we're doing what we're doing, funding will come a little bit easier. But the fact is, in order to do the work we're doing, it takes funding. So, but now that all said, I have another topic I want to bring up, but you look like you had something you wanted to say.
Yeah, let me jump in first. One in the chat on DLive, Gator Grad talked about he attended a mock convention where proposed lawmaker accountability amendment post to public minimum 30 days. Yeah, that's all good stuff. I like those ideas. But Gator Grad, a mutual friend of Doug and mine, John D. Herrera, runs a website. So take this down. It's called Friends of the Article 5 Convention, or FOAV.
C.org.
Mm-hmm. I get it right now.
FOAVC.org.
Okay, yeah, and he's going to have a mock convention that I will be participating in.
Yeah, I'm actually also supposed to be a delegate May 25th, but for that convention, the website's different.
Yeah,
it's article5convention.org, and that's article V or 5 Roman numeral 5 convention.org.
Let's okay, I'm gonna
article5convention.org, but it's a V.
Okay, yeah, I got it. I'd already been there. I'm gonna post that in. But anybody who wants to see what a mock convention looks like, I did that with him a couple years ago when Doug first introduced me to Mr. Herrera, there wasn't enough participation. I had some things I thought at the time where I was very proud of, a couple of proposed amendments, and there's a couple people in there that had some things I thought were batshit crazy, but it's a good way to, they're good conversations. And so I welcome everybody to go check it out, register yourself as a delegate, and put your 2 cents in.
May 25th is that convention. John D. Herrera actually visited me when I gave my presentation in Camarillo. He was there. As a matter of fact, he helped me with my table, sold a few books for me, all that. And then during my speech, when I talked about an Article 5 convention, I pointed people in his direction. I said, hey, go, you got questions? Talk to this guy here. He's got, a card he can give you, got information he can give you, so forth. I'm a firm believer that an Article 5 convention is a valuable tool. When people ask me, oh, is that the same thing as Convention of States? Well, yes, basically. But the difficulty with Convention of States, as much as I love the fact that there's an organization out there that's got a decent size that's trying to do this, is they're not exactly they don't have their train on the track firmly and solidly, because some of the information is not exactly right. For example, Well, Doug, we only need 2 or 3 more states and we can call the convention. The applications, unless they say so in the application, don't expire when a state applies for Article 5 convention. You need 2/3 of the states to apply for a convention. There are over 750 applications on record from 49 states. It was 50. Oklahoma had one. They rescinded that one. So it's 49. So we have 49 of 50 states that have applied for convention. Well, yeah, but Doug, Congress hasn't called the convention. Well, Ninth Amendment says that they're not supposed to disparage any of our rights, and we have a right to have a convention too. So I believe because of the Ninth Amendment, we can hold it anyway. Go ahead, Brady. Did you have something you want to add to that?
Well, you talk about Oklahoma, but interestingly enough, they are considered on the website of conventionofstates.com. Oklahoma has passed a new resolution, so now it's 50 out of 50.
So it's back to 50 again. When did that resolution pass?
Let me see. Wait, I have that. Bear with me. 2016.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
I am not aware of that resolution.
Now you are correct.
I stand corrected. All 50 states.
Well, I don't know that it's all 50, but I know that their retraction no longer matters.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's all 50 then.
So,
all right, very good.
Wait. Let's close this point out in 30 seconds or less. Does it not say in Article 5 that Congress shall convene a convention?
Yeah, so they're violating the Constitution by not calling the convention.
They don't have a choice. They can't.
They don't have a choice.
They don't say, well, maybe we'll call a convention. No, they don't.
So they're denying and disparaging a right.
So let's petition them. Let's petition them right now and say, let's have the convention.
Well, actually, there was a Republican a few months ago that actually had a bill on the floor to call a convention, but it didn't go anywhere.
Well, the other thing is about Convention of States action, where we both disagree with them, is they think that they're advertising, well, we only have these 3 items will be debated. That's it. So you don't have to worry about a runaway convention. No, there's nothing in the Constitution that says you can limit what's talked about with an Article 5 convention. When the states get together to review their contract with the federal government, everything's on the table. And B, they say, well, we're afraid of a runaway convention. I want a runaway convention. We were given one tool by the founding fathers to rein in an out-of-control federal government, and we've never utilized it. So because of that, for 240 years, these statists have gained more and more power for the central government and less for we the people and the states. It's time to rip it all back once and for all. I want a runaway convention. I am not concerned about rights being lost, because there's going to be at least 13 states that are going to say, hell no, you're not taking away our second.
Right. It takes 3/4 ratification still. And that right there is definitely a fail-safe. And I want to add a couple things to that, because people say, well, Doug, the powerful Soros type people, they're going to infiltrate, and they're going to have their people there, and they're going to turn it into a quagmire. Well, first of all, you don't refuse to use a hammer to nail in nails because you might hit your thumb. It's an important tool. Use it. You just make sure you use it properly. You don't go get a sponge to hammer in a nail because you're worried. You use a hammer. That's the tool that's given to you. Number one. Number two, my wonderful friends, good friends, they're close. We agree on everything else in the world, and I love these people. But the members of the John Birch Society and Eagle Forum that are paranoid about a runaway convention because the bad guys will infiltrate and take control, thank you for your paranoia. Because of your paranoia, when, not if, but when we have this convention, I know you'll be all over it to make sure it remains in the proper hands. So thank you for your paranoia. You will be a key component in making sure that these conventions, and I say conventions because I hope we have more than one, are run properly.
Yeah, and the other really important thing to know is anybody who's currently holding office doesn't get to be at the convention.
No.
This is of we the people.
Yeah. Matter of fact, all of the ratifying conventions, while office holders were present in the debates, no office holder was allowed to vote regarding ratification. This is a rule of convention. Office holders don't get to be voting delegates. Period.
That's because they have a conflict of interest.
Exactly.
Inherently. And So what you want is for people like Doug or myself to represent your state and go there and hold these people, their feet to the fire. And we will. Whatever state I'm living in when it happens, I'm going to do everything I can to be one of the delegates. That's why I'll get involved day one. Because, well, I don't trust a lot of the bastards in this country. George Soros is actively funding anti-convention of states efforts. So that's all you need to know.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously afraid of it.
Yeah. You got one last topic, buddy. Go for it.
Yeah, I've got one last topic, and this is just a piece of history, but it ties kind of a little bit into what's going on today. I'm going to read a basically 3-paragraph article. 2 of the paragraphs are a little longer, the other one's short, because we talk about what's going on today with racism and the institutionalized systemic racism in America. Well, let's read about when racism really was a problem. On the evening of March 21, 1915, President Woodrow Wilson hosted a special screening at the White House of a film titled The Birth of a Nation. The film was directed by D.W. Griffith and based on a novel by Wilson's good friend, Thomas Dixon, titled The Klansman. The film presented a distorted portrait of the South after the Civil War, glorifying the Ku Klux Klan and degenerating blacks. The film portrayed blacks as violent against Southern whites and sexually forcing themselves upon white women. The Klan was portrayed as the South's savior from the alleged tyranny of a savage black population. After the film, an enthusiastic Wilson reportedly remarked, "It is like writing history with lightning, and my only regret is that it is all so terribly true." Except it wasn't. Black audiences openly wept at the film's malicious portrayal of former slaves. White audiences largely cheered. The film swept through the country, serving as a factor behind riots breaking out in major cities like Boston and Philadelphia. Some cities refused to allow the film to be shown. Gangs of whites roamed city streets attacking blacks in retaliation to what they viewed in the film. In Lafayette, Indiana, a white man killed a black teenager after seeing the movie. Thomas Dixon reveled in its triumph. "The real purpose of my film," he confessed gleefully, "was to revolutionize Northern audiences that would transform every man into a Southern partisan for life." Woodrow Wilson, the racist Democrat, was proud to have hosted the film at the White House. Now, this is a window into history, and while I use the term Civil War for the average audience out there, it really wasn't a civil war. It was a war between the states. That's a discussion for another time. But aside from that, when it comes to what I wrote here, the reason why I wrote this is I want people to realize these are issues that are nothing new, and real racism has existed in the history of this country. But it doesn't today like it did then. We don't have what's going on then going on today in the same manner. Well, we sort of do, but now everything's been flipped. Now it's Black Lives Matter that's acting in a manner that's like those roving white gangs. So here's the question. Do we turn our back on what I just talked about? Or do we remember history and do something about it? It's interesting because they topple statues. I read an article not too long ago that at the Arlington Cemetery, National Cemetery, they are going to be taking down certain Confederate statues.
Well, yes, because it's built on Robert E. Lee's estate. And Robert E. Lee is obviously a racist because he fought for the South.
But they say, well, we got to get this racism out of our sight. Then you forget about it and it will repeat itself. There will be slavery in America again if we keep erasing every single image that reminds us that it once existed. It may not be by the same people, but something of that nature will emerge again. If we forget this history, if we allow it to be pushed out of the public eye. The reason they're doing it, obviously, of course, though, is this deconstruction. It's deconstruction of history. Well, gosh, if we got racism in our history, that means everybody's racist was found racism, which means the system's bad. See, you can't fix what ain't broke. So they got to convince you that American liberty is broken.
Yeah,
That's what it's all about.
George Orwell is rolling over in his grave right now with this stuff.
Yeah.
Was it 2 or 3 days ago? Biden gave a speech, and once again he reiterated that white supremacy is the biggest threat. White supremacist extremists are the biggest threat to our national security. Mayorkas, who's supposed to be closing our border, agreed with him today on the Sunday talk shows. This is ridiculous. I've been at so many rallies and protests and stuff like that, and I've yet to meet a freaking white supremacist. Where are they? Yeah, and it's not Patriot Front. Those guys are feds in their little khakis and blues. I've never met one of those guys either. And you'd think I'd be recruited. I'd be one of their, targets, activist guy who holds conservative principles. Never met a single person, never met one of these people online. They are feds. That's a setup. But this boogeyman of the white supremacists, they keep trying to summon out of nowhere. And their people believe this. They still call us Nazis. They call us racist. What evidence do you have of this? Joe Biden launches his campaign on the myth that even Snopes is called WAPO called it four Pinocchios. Donald Trump did not say the Nazis were very fine people in Charlottesville. Biden launched his campaign saying, that's what inspired me. No, Joe Biden said no. I'm sorry, Trump said on that speech, there were great people on both ends, but those ones who were there to promote white supremacy, I condemn them completely. He said that. They just ignore it. They're trying to erase it out of history.
I will say this. I have come across a couple of white supremacists in my life. They were Democrat politicians, though. But that's beside the point.
Yeah, there's Joe Biden.
Yeah. All right. And we're out of time with about 2.5 minutes, 2 minutes left till the top of the hour. And the ladies, I'm sure, will be filing in pretty quick. In fact, I can see that Chris is already signed in. Let me wrap it up a little bit with thank you for spending the time with us. Appreciate this. And if you are enjoying Brady and I working together, more of this is on the horizon. So continue to visit politicalpistachio.com, douglasvgibbs.com, so that once we get this all ready to roll, and Constitution Restoration Society.com down the road. Once we get this all rolling, we will be glad to make sure everybody knows about it. Before I sign out, Brady?
You can find me at mostly at my Rumble channels. One is War_Hamster. The other one is at Brady_Fox, FOXX. The best place if you want to interact with me is go to patriots.win and just look for War_Hamster. I post in there about 20, 30 times a day, interact. And also you can find me on Twitter, which some of our fine audience have been posting those Twitter connections all day long. And I'm going to be more active on Truth Social. And once again, I believe that's War_Hamster, or it's War_Hamster 1776. I forget which one it is. Anyways, I'm going to start getting more active. My Substack will be announced soon. I've got a bunch of articles ready to rock and roll. As soon as we get Revolution Harbor up and running, which is going to be a platform for all independent content creators to get away from censorship. That's what we're building. We started building it for Doug, and now we're building it for everyone. And you'll hear a lot more about that soon.
All right, and to sign out, united we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. Thank you for spending the time with us. If you enjoyed this, we got more on the horizon. douglasvgibbs.com, politicalpistachio.com. I'm getting ready to also start constitutioneducation.net. Write that one down, constitutioneducation.net. Of course, eventually, as Brady has mentioned, douglasvgibbs.com. We'll have all of those links. So thank you for spending the time with us. Appreciate you. And we'll probably be here next week going through Federalist Paper 12, is it? Or Anti-Federalist 11 for something?
We should be on Anti-Federalist. We should be on Anti-Federalist 12.
Okay, Anti-Federalist 12 next week. All right. That all said, thank you guys for spending the time with us. Hi, Chris. And Kath just left the room, but she'll be back.
She jumped out. How you guys doing?
Oh, fantastic.
Hey, Chris, how are you?
Good. How are you doing? Pick up a Shame on Montana Club. I've only used it once because I brought it home. I don't know who I got it from because I've never been there, but I go to write down the notes, and that's me trying to get the pen to work. I hate that, and it happens so often. Anyway, Yeah, great work, guys. It's always nice to see you guys here. Where did she go? She must have she has internet problems, I bet. Oh well. I've
Who,
been
me?
working. There she is. There she is. Happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day
Happy
to
Mother's Day.
guys who are married to mothers.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
my wife and I for Mother's Day went to the Green Dragon, a replica of the Boston Green Dragon, which was actually torn down in 1854. But the original Green Dragon was where the Patriots met to plan the Boston Tea Party, for example. So there is a replica of that in Carlsbad. I mentioned it at the beginning of the program. So you know, my wife is an awesome mother when she says, "Hey, for Mother's Day, I want to go to the Green Dragon."
She's a keeper. She's a keeper.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's pretty
Well,
cool.
After 30 years, I think he figured that out.
Yeah, well, 39 years coming up in
39?
August. It'll be
I'm trying not to make
39
you-
years in August.
I was trying
3
not to
months.
make you look that old. Ugh.
I appreciate that. Well, I tell people the reason why I don't look that old is because I'm fat and it pushes the wrinkles out. But you know,
Yeah, you and Oprah, right?
yeah.
How you doing,
man.
ladies? Good to see
Yeah.
you. Great show last Sunday. I had a good time. I hung out for a while.
I saw
Oh,
that.
great.
It's fun seeing you out there.
Yep. I got some really good memes tonight and a couple videos too. So funny videos, right?
How much-
Okay.
How
We'll
much
mix it
time?
up.
How much time do you guys spend doing show prep?
Depends.
45 minutes, an hour.
Just
Probably
collecting
about
all the memes and storing them, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I collect things. I have an element server, and we have a newsroom there. People drop things in there, so it makes it kind of easy for me. I go in there and pick through that
Right.
stuff, and
Right.
I have a meme room too, so it's pretty handy.
Well, Chris, did I see that you do like more than one show on Patriot Soapbox, like during the week?
Yeah, I do Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 8 to 11 Pacific time also.
Yeah, I accidentally dropped in on one of your shows the other night, on the other one, so I didn't know that. So that was cool.
Yep, that's the deal. So that's fun. I have a lot of fun. I really enjoy chat and getting the feedback, and I learn a lot from chat too. You know, they learn a lot from the hosts here, but we also learn a lot from them. It's an aggregate, it's a consolidated ball of knowledge that people have, and it's always interesting when we have certain people that are just like fact checkers, and they're out there. If you say the wrong thing, they'll straighten you right up.
Guilty.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's going to be right 100% of the time. We do our best because we are people who give out information, and we want that information to be as accurate as possible. But sometimes, my mom, she was a researcher, and she got fooled 2 times. Once was kind of weird, but the one time she actually got fooled, and that was over a 50-year time because she was a very thorough researcher. And that was back before the internet, most of it. She knew her stuff. She knew about all the stuff that we're seeing now. I wish she was still alive to see it, because everything she said was coming is here. And she told me that when I was a kid. She knew about it.
One of the early stories we discussed on today's show was an error that the History Channel put online, and I caught it. By the way, I did contact them about it. We'll see if they fix it or if it was on purpose. But basically, when I looked up the 18th and 21st Amendments, it said that Congress ratifies amendments. Last I checked, that's the states that ratify amendments. But
Kind of important. No, it's
Yeah.
actually one of the things I say all the time is, and I love being fact checked. I love being wrong. Please prove me wrong. It means I learned something new.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that's called being intellectually objective, or whatever, or intellectually honest. You know, that's called objectivity. I'm not going to be right on everything. So
Right.
please tell me when I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's like with the Bible, I was telling people I like to be challenged on certain things that I believe, because it forces me to go back and revisit why I believe what I do, in case I've got kind of shady. Because sometimes you forget things. Well, I've had a head injury, so I do forget an awful lot. I'll remember impressions, but I won't remember details like I used to. So I'll think, okay, why do I believe in a pre-trib rapture? Well, let's go back and see. Is it possible it's not real? It's a poster, not real at all. I will go back and go over the whole thing again to make sure that I'm not wrong, because I don't want to be putting things out there, especially with the Bible, that are untrue. So I like it when people try to challenge me on things like that. The flat earth thing, That's more of a thing to do when you don't have anything else to do, because it's not a deal breaker for salvation. It's not a super important thing if people want to believe it or not, but it's kind of fun to go in there and poke around and poke holes and things. But other than that,
I get into prophecy discussions a lot, and I have a lot of friends who think things that are not quite what I believe. And one of them, Brady and I share a show with on Tuesdays, who has certain ideas. And I joke with him all the time. I said, well, fortunately for you, it does not say in the Bible for how you believe in prophecy that thou shalt be saved.
yeah.
What it says is, you are saved by grace, not by works, lest any man should boast, in Ephesians. So believe what you want to believe about prophecy, but and prophecy is kind of something I enjoy kind of playing with a little bit. But
Yeah. Do you ever listen to Chuck Missler?
yeah, I'm a huge Chuck Missler fan. When I was younger, I don't as much anymore. And is he even still with us?
No, he died about 6 years ago.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But yeah, I was a huge fan of Chuck Missler. He's the one that kind of got me to realize that science and Christianity does mix.
Yes.
Which I, and I mean, I was in the debate club way back in high school, and I remember one of my first debates was creationism versus evolution. So I've been playing this game a long time. But Chuck Missler definitely was one of my favorites when he was around.
Yeah, I play him sometimes on the show, and it is a good way to teach people without having to reinvent the wheel, because he has so much detail. There'll be people out in chat that can test certain things. It's like, okay, I could address that, but Chuck Missler says it so much better and gives proof. So I like to play his, as a matter of fact, I'm going through his Revelation series kind of sporadically, but we're getting through his Revelation series. And then I think we're starting at Genesis for another one. But if I have some spare time on the show when I don't have anything going on, I'll play him, because everybody seems to always learn something from him.
Rottweiler in the chat room says, I just discovered the word rapture is not in the Constitution last night. Yeah, well, the word's not in the Constitution, in the Bible. The word rapture doesn't exist. I guess the Constitution in my mind. The word rapture is not in the Bible. Now, when you look at the description of quote unquote the rapture, and I'm also one that tends not to use that word, because really it's a resurrection. The dead rise first; they're resurrected, and so I tend to use the resurrection, and then those alive follow. But rapture is a fine word to explain what the event is. But you're right; it doesn't exist in the Bible. It's not used in the Bible.
It does exist in the Bible.
The word rapture.
Rapturos is in the Bible, in the Latin version of the Bible. It translates to harpazo in the Greek, and in the Greek to English is caught up. So rapture is in the Bible. That's where they get.
So when it says caught up, the word rapture is
Latin for caught up.
Interesting.
Yeah, if you look in the Latin Bible. So it is in the Bible, just not.
It's just not in the King James Bible in that form.
In that form, yeah, but it all translates to the same thing.
Yeah.
But people
I'm actually starting to read the Geneva Bible, which came before the King James Bible, because I've learned a lot of things about the King James Bible. King James was trying to kind of kill this idea of localism and individuality, and so now it brings into question what happened with the King James Version because of that. And well,
if you look into how the King James Version was translated, it's very interesting. King James had nothing to do with the translating. He just got people together to do it. There was a panel of, I think, 58 people that worked on that. Also, from what I have been reading, the Pilgrims had the Geneva Bible and didn't want it. They wanted a new translation. They wanted the right translation. So they got a hold of King James somehow. I don't remember how that exactly happened, but King James brokered the deal to get that done. But they never used the Geneva again, the Pilgrims. So
yeah, I've read that exact same thing. But nonetheless, I want to get a Geneva, or I have a Geneva Bible. I'm going through it because I do want to see what were, of course, you get into when you get into the definitions and the etymology of words, that's where Strong's comes in, and references like that help. Break it down. That's one of the things I love about my pastor is when he talks about this, he'll break everything down all the way back to the original language being used, what it really meant. And so I tease him all the time and say, Pastor, you preach about the Bible sort of like I teach about the Constitution. Bravo. And he kind of laughs because
that's good, because what I do if somebody challenges me out in chat and I have time, I will go into the Blue Letter Bible And in the Blue Letter Bible, there's an interlinear area, and it will take every single word and give you the Greek, if it's Greek, if it was originally Hebrew, the Hebrew.
Right.
It will tell you exactly how that particular word was used, because sometimes the same words will be used in a different way. It will tell you how the exact same word was used in the exact same way in other places, so you get a good idea of what it really means. And I use that a lot to make sure that I understand what the Bible, to make sure that I understand the intent of the writer, of the author. But yeah, that Blue Letter Bible is awesome. You guys, if you don't ever, it's online for free. Go grab it and use that. And also, when you do your Geneva research, are you going to keep notes so you can do
Absolutely.
like a show or something on that? That you could even come on my show and do that if you want.
Okay.
Do a breakdown of
Well, and as a historian and knowing that Pilgrims in Jamestown had the Geneva Bible, that's kind of what got me wondering. And I started doing a little research. And so, and me being the kind of guy I am, I'm not satisfied with just hearing somebody tell me something. I got to dig into it, which means I'll be busy for the rest of my life with, yeah. So someone says, Doug, will you ever retire? What do you mean?
What's that? What's that?
Well, you haven't actually worked in a long time because you just love what you're doing. So it's not actually work.
This is true. This is true. Yeah, the old Chinese proverb, right? The man who finds the job he loves never works again.
That's right.
All right. Well, my lovely wife on Mother's Day just peeked in the door because she knows that my show was supposed to end at 7, or our show, should I say, with Brady and Alan, not being here, Alan. So ladies, I'm going to hand off it's the funnest part about being on Alan's For the Republic is the handoff at the end. I so enjoy the 5-10 minutes that we get a chance to chat.
Yeah, I enjoy the chats we have. It's pretty awesome.
Ladies, have a great show. I will tune in about half an hour. I'll be back.
Okay, Brady.
Okay, Arnold.
Daggy.
And ladies, thank you for all you do, and thank you to Patriot Soapbox for what Patriot Soapbox does. This is a fantastic network. So thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good week, okay? See you next week.
Thank you. See you then.
All right.